Well, an important economic week ahead, and among our top stories from the desk, we'll be discussing this ongoing brutal battle that consumers are waging against price increases on things like food, fuel, electricity. Let's bring in SABC News economics editor Tshepo Mongoai to discuss. Tshepo, good evening to you and welcome. CPI figures expected out on Wednesday, and CPI really measures the change in pricing for consumer goods. And it's also about the cost of living in South Africa. I know last time we got a real shock, right, when we saw the price of things like eggs and electricity go up. What can we expect this time around?
Well, overall, Iman, prices remain high for many consumers. Remember, especially in the first half of last year, where we've really seen a lot of pressure in terms of prices that have been coming through into the economy. And now what we are seeing is that many of those businesses and factory gates have really pushed those prices in to consumers. And we're starting to feel the impact on households in terms of their affordability, because it's really putting pressure, and compounded by high interest rates. It of course brings into the issue of affordability by many households. So we do expect that although inflation, there were signs towards the second half of last year that international inflationary pressures were abating a bit, and that was starting to fit into the local market, although many of our domestic prices remain high. I mean, mention one, electricity prices. We've seen an increase. In fact, we've seen the implementation of that 18% from Eskom kicking in. That is going to feed into other consumer prices and services and into the broader economy going forward. So with the inflation that we're expecting, we expect generally some moderation coming through. It won't be significant. It will be around 7%, perhaps slightly below 7%, or slightly up, that number. But most economists do expect that it will be below 7% print. Because there were signs that we've seen the petrol price, there was some moderation kicking in there, and that will help. But for many households, it's still extremely difficult. Many retailers are not reaching their targets. As we speak, we know of Pick and Pay recently. They are restructuring, and largely because it's been very difficult, their costs are very high, and they have not been able to reach their targets in terms of sales at their various stores.
And it makes sense because there's, less going into the pockets of, average South Africans, which means less going into the cash registries. And we talked about the high indebtedness levels of people as well, who are totally cash trapped. So where they're going to find that extra liquidity is a subject for another discussion. But another albatross around the neck in terms of our economy is the post office. They're facing provisional liquidation. At the last budget, they got a bailout of around 2.4 billion rand. The minister in charge, and this is Mondli Gungubele, asking questions about details on how they've been managing the bottom line for the post offices. But where to from here?
The post office is one of those state-owned enterprises that are facing serious challenges, but mainly because of its significance in terms of how it links to the main economy. It's not quite pronounced, and that is why you see that the pace at which government is attending to its challenges, it's been slow. And to make matters worse is the change in terms of cabinet reshuffle. We have the new Minister of Communications now, who has to familiarize himself with very complex issues, especially in the telecommunications space, and including postal as well, and post office, and the shared problems. And that's why you're seeing delays in terms of pronouncement on digital migration. We still want clarity on that. And of course, the post office, the creditors have been screaming, and they went to court and to plead with the court so that they put a provisional liquidation on the post office. We do expect that government will act and avert this provisional liquidation being made final. There is money already in the kitty. We're waiting for that turnaround strategy.
Yeah.
But it's going to be an uphill battle in terms of positioning the post office, in terms of getting its model right. There are a lot of questions. It's currently retrenching. It needs proper maintenance of its buildings. Many of them are not in a good state. So there's a lot that the post office needs to achieve in order to reclaim itself in terms of a service provider.
Yeah, and this has been an institutional issue, institutional dysfunction inside the post office. So, any hopes for a quick turnaround certainly seem to be remote. And a 2.4 billion rand bailout is nothing to be sneezed at. That's certainly a big amount of money. Fortunately, the minister there giving some assurances that perhaps social grants and those kinds of responsibilities that they traditionally take care of, they'll still be able to do. We're going to have to pause it on that note. SABC News economics editor Tshepo Mongoai just sharing with us some of the big economic stories that will be coming up this week.